Oh, Jose Castro, you know?
Tell me about Jose Castro.
Okay.
So Jose Castro, I know, was my neighbor,
Yes,
and he was a great mason.
he was, there were all different kinds of people there in South Colton who had different trades.
Mhm.
Like my father was a plumber, Castro he was a mason. We had other, Chalillo.
Mhm.
Chalillo was a carpenter.
Who was Chanillo?
Chalillo, I don't know, I forgot what his real name was,
Uh-huh.
but he was another person that was in South Colton, and he was a carpenter by trade. So if one family needed something, they would all go over there and help them out.
Uh-huh.
And you never charged him anything, you know? Only that person would provide the materials. And then next time somebody else needed something, they would go over to their
I
house.
remember my dad used to be part of that
Okay.
group because he
Mhm.
did the curb and gutter and sidewalks
okay.
and patios.
Mhm.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. There were a lot of people that had
Mhm.
were specialists in different
They
trades.
were. Mhm.
Uh-huh.
Mhm. Well, like I said, Jose Castro was was called maestro. We call him maestro.
Maestro, yeah.
We call him maestro. I know
Yeah, I
the
remember.
correct word is maestro, but everybody maestro. That's the way they phrased it. But he was a great mason, and he's got that as you come into South Colton, there in front of a Voita store, that big monument that's there.
Oh, the Welcome to Colton
Yeah,
Monument.
he built that one.
Oh, he built that?
He built that one.
That's on O Street and La Cadena.
Oh, in La Cadena, he built
Uh-huh,
that,
uh-huh.
he made that. And then in 1964, when I got married and having a house built, and he came over and he looked and he goes, diles que no hagan con esa pared, don't do anything with that wall. Why? I'm gonna build you a fireplace. What? I'm gonna build you a fireplace. He did. He built me a fireplace. It's still standing. It's still standing today. It looks like it was built maybe 10 years ago. It's still, all the brickwork that's outside of my house, I have brickwork, he did all of that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Now, Tony, did you have any brothers and sisters?
No,
You didn't?
no, I'm an only child. Yep, I'm an only child, I know. I know, as everybody talks around here about, they came from families, maybe a small family was 4 or 5 kids, but most of them were 8 or 9 or 10. Well, that didn't happen with me. My mother married later in life with her because my mother was second to the oldest, and her mother died young. In fact, my grandmother died in 1929 of a ruptured appendix, and so that left my mother and her older sister to take care of her 2 younger brothers that were left there. Her 2 younger brothers were like 4 and 6. So my mother didn't marry, she was like 28, and I wasn't born till she was 34, okay? Which was very rare.
Very.
Very rare
Yeah.
in those days. By the time you were 15, you were married.
Yeah.
Between 15 and 18, after 18, a girl was considered an old maid. But my mother had to stay home to take care of her brothers, her brother and sister, because
Mhm.
they were like 4 and 6 when my grandmother died.
So you were spoiled.
Very much so. Everybody tells me I was, like I said, yes. Yes, I always say my father provided for my mother and me everything we needed and a lot of things we wanted.
Uh-huh.
Because we were the only, you only had to provide for me and my mother.
And your grandfather had a thriving business.
And he had a thriving business, so,
Yeah.
So, but, yeah, that's, well, I was the only one. But I have, like, some of my mother's brothers and sisters, they had like 7 kids, 9 kids, 5 kids, everybody else.
Yeah.
Except for one uncle. He never had any children at all. One of my mother's brothers never had any children at all.
Well, tell us about you growing up in La Calle Cinco, the barrio La Calle Cinco. Who were your friends there?
My friends were basically, a lot of my cousins lived around there. And they were basically, I have a lot of cousins who were my age. So basically, in fact, right there on, like I said, where my grandfather's property was, on the other corner on Birch, my other uncle lived there, my other grandfather's son, and he had 9 children, so I had 9 cousins there, and I had quite a few who were my age. So this is where I hung around with them.
Mhm.
This is growing up.
Mm-hmm. Were you familiar with what was the name of the dairy at the end of 5th Street?
Long's Dairy.
Long's Dairy.
George Long. Yes,
Okay.
George Long. Long's Dairy. Yes. Yes, we used to go down there and get their milk from them.
Okay,
Yes, yes.
okay.
That's past right there where Caldera had its swimming pool.
Oh, Caldera swimming pool, tell me
Yes.
about that. You-
Well, I don't remember when it was going, because I guess when I remember it, it was already abandoned, and now of course it's all gone.
Uh-huh.
But they tell me that back down there on Fog and Fifth, they had the pool there, because it was hard to get into the Colton plunge, it was hard to go on the other side.
Right.
So we did our own swimming pool, and I understand that they had a bull ring over there, and they used to have dances, tardeadas and everything. Now, this was before my time, I don't remember any of this.
They also said that they had a baseball
A
field there.
baseball field too, yeah,
Uh-huh.
that's what they tell me.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
But you just didn't experience that
No,
because
no,
you were too young.
You were too young. This
Yeah.
must have happened probably I would say in the 30s and maybe into the 40s.
Uh-huh.
I was born in 42, so
Uh-huh.
I wouldn't remember all this.
Yeah. And Joaquin, your friends, tell us about, you had a club that you belonged to. Tell us about your club, and when did it start? Who were the members of your club that started well, how did it start?
Well, I used to hang around with close friends. We kind of grew up together. Frank Bustos from the
Yes.
family, Jimmy Barra, and Trini Hernandez. We used to hang around quite a bit together. We used to walk all over Colton. And my brother Frank was.
Did you drive?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Okay, I could drive, but I didn't have a car to
Okay.
drive yet. Okay. I didn't drive until after my father passed away. What I meant, really drive. Okay. When we had our 8th grade graduation, remember, we had our separate from the other kids from the junior high. The Sardanias had the dance.
Oh, tell me about that. I've heard about the Saldana family. They lived on Maple Street.
Maple Street.
And then they were very, very generous with their house.
Yes.
That they would provide, like you said, graduation. And when your class graduated
From junior high.
from Colton Junior High School, you participated in the graduation of Colton Junior High School.
Yes.
And then you came and did your own Chicano Mexican graduation at the Saldana house.
Yes.
Okay, tell me
And
about
that was the first time I drove my car, which I just started to learn. I invited this girl, Christine Chavez. I think you might
Yes,
have known her.
yeah.
Okay. She was surprised that I showed up in the car by myself, because in junior high at that time, who drives around,
Yeah.
So that was the first time I drove. I drove from there to the Sardanias, but anyway, by that time I already knew Frankie and Jimmy and Trini. We used to call him Tati. And my brother Frank used to hang around with these other kids that were organizing a club known as the Condors. So one day, my brother Frank told me, he says, the guys want to know if you want to join with us. And I said, well, I don't know, but we'll go. So the 4 of us went over there to see, just to talk and see what, but we wound up joining the club, okay? And during that time, they were trying to find a name, which they had come down with the Condors. But when we joined, they wanted a different change. Well, what do you think? Well, I remember when Ernie Kunga and you used to hang around with Ernie and those guys. And at that time, I had just started hanging around with you guys, okay? And I remember the drawing that Ernie came up with a conquistador, half buck showing and the lance all. I thought that was a neat.
So Ernie did the logo for you guys.
Ernie did the logo. So I suggested the guys, there's an emblem that I've seen, and I want you to look at it and see what you think. Okay. So we asked Ernie if we could see it, you know, and he showed it to us, and then we wound up asking, can we use your logo? Sure. So we wound up naming our club Conquistadores.
So that's when the Conquistadores
That's when
were
we
organized,
Yeah.
organized, okay.
Yeah. And
Do you remember who the members of your club was during that initial period?
yes, it was Richard Rivas.
Richard Rivas.
Richard Rivas, Henry Matos, Johnny Hernandez from the Hernandez family there, and Manuel Colunga,
Mhm.
Denny Luna.
Mhm.
Those are big families.
Mhm.
And so there was about maybe 10, 15 kids, and then us.
So it was kind of a friends getting together,
Yeah,
and then other friends bringing other friends to the club.
right.
And it was kind of a social getting together kind of activity.
Yeah, because we used to play a lot of baseball in the street.
Okay.
Okay, that's how we get.
Sports was part of it too.
Yeah, we got together and played a lot of baseball down on the street, and then afterwards we started going over to the. I don't know if you ever got involved with playing baseball on that lot right next to the railroad tracks,
Mhm.
across the street from the laundry on
Yes.
Seventh and K.
Yes.
There was a laundry there. Across the street
Yes.
there was an empty field
Right,
where Father Luki,
right.
at the time, was still in high school.
Mhm.
Mario Arroyo
Mhm.
and Freddie Chavez, Nica.
Mhm.
They were getting us together and go play ball over there.
They were the older guys.
They were the older guys.
And they were kind of just directing you
Yeah.
guys, okay.
Yeah, so that's how we knew each other. So anyway, we decided, let's get together and you know, play sport with other towns.
Mhm.
So that's how we got started. That's what we started doing,
Uh-huh.
playing sports against other cities.
Mhm.
And but you know, you start wearing a jacket with an emblem,
The colors,
the colors, then people start coming at you. You know,
yeah.
and
So you were a gang,
we're then considered a gang,
not a club.
not a club anymore.
Okay.
So we had to contend not only from other cities, from within our own town, because there was maybe 5 or 6 other groups. There were
There were also clubs.
gangs,
Okay.
clubs, yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's how you know you
So what year was that when you started working?
this was in 1958 when we finally were
Okay.
a club.
So late 50s, eh?
Late 50s, and then through time when I graduated, once I graduated, I kind of started thinking about other things. In fact, I met my wife right in the middle of, almost at the end of 58. So when she was a freshman in high school, I was already a senior.
Mhm.
And so when I graduated, I started thinking about other things. You know, what am I going to do in the future? You know, so the guys that were in the club, we were graduating one right after another.
Yeah, you mentioned that that you were just, your motivation and your goal was to graduate from high school.
Yes.
Okay, and that's why you left that part-time job.
Yes.
And you also mentioned that you wanted to get a job right away. What kind of work did you get after high school, Bucky?
Well, at that time, you know, you go after anything that's available. You know, so I started working at this auto body fender shop that Henry Mendoza used to run.
There was a corner of La Cadena and M Street, okay.
And M Street.
Mhm.
So I worked there for maybe a year.
Mhm.
And then soon after that, my girlfriend at the time, which is now my wife, her uncle asked me if I wanted to work with him at Mayan Foods, which was a food
what was his
processing.
name? What was his name?
His name was Benny Urquiza.
Oh.
Okay, he had been there since, I don't know.
So they worked at
Early
Mayan, you
50s.
worked at Mayan then?
I worked at
Mayan,
Mayan,
which was the
from 60.
pickle factory.
Yes, they made mayonnaise, mustard, and pickles, and then they also used to supply the lounges with bar supplies. You know. So anyway, I worked there for till about 66, 67, and then I left because I was talking to this friend of mine, Ray Hernandez. He worked at Dun & Bush, which is air conditioning and refrigeration place. And we just got to talking about it, and I said, you know what, I'm looking for another job that pays a little more. So that's when he told me that, why don't you come over to where I work, and you can get one there. He said, ask for Eddie Cortez. Eddie Cortez was raised in a barrio, you know.
He was raised in Beverly Hills, huh?
Yeah.
Beverly Hills.
Beverly Hills.
Beverly Hills.
So Eddie managed to give me a job there, and I worked there till 69, because at that time we got word they were going to close down the plant. They're moving to Virginia. So I said, well, this is no good. I've only been here a couple of years. So anyway, I started looking for a job, and within a week I found a job with a cement plant.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
And how long were you at the cement plant?
I was there 18 years.
18 years?
Yeah, I worked 10 years as a labor, 5 as labor, and then 5 as what you call a powderman.
Mm-hmm.
Is you load part of the mountain with charged dynamite so they can get the lime rock out of there.
Mm.
So that's what I started doing, and then I was asked if I wanted to be part of which they were starting a safety department, okay, which they didn't really have a safety department. So the person, Frank Diorsi, who came in to take over the department, in fact, he took over the department for California, Portland, and our sister plants in Mojave Desert, and Mojave, and then in Relito, Arizona. So he was in charge of 3 plants. So he asked me if I would, I said, why not? You know? So I got training through him, and then I attended community colleges to pertain to my job, what I needed to learn. And I did that for 8 years, which is very rewarding. I learned a lot, quite a bit, not only from Frank, but from the work that was done as far as on the management side.
And how did you get involved with a job in Colton, city of Colton? Was it also one of your friends mentioned, or? You said they had a big layoff at the cement
Yes,
plant.
because I was the newest one in the department, in the safety department, I was laid off. And I was off for about 3 months. And then the plant manager asked me, why don't you come back? So why not? During that time I was off, I was working all over the place. I worked at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory installing windows for the buildings there with a contractor from Ontario. And rather than driving way over there, I'm only 5 minutes away from the plant. Sure, why not? So I went back and I worked there for about 6 months, and I said, you know what? I think I was already considering leaving when this friend of mine that I work with, he said, you know what? They're taking applications for the city of Colton. So I went and put one in.
And you got hired?
Took the
Which
test.
department?
Took the test, and at that time they were looking for personnel in the water department and building maintenance and what they call parks department. So I got hired in the water department.
And you were there for how long?
I was there for 15 years.
Yeah, 15 years, and you retired when? When did you retire?
I retired in 2003.
You retired young?
I retired, yeah.
No tiene vergüenza, ¿verdad? You retired young. And Tony, you didn't like being a plumber.
No,
And you didn't
no.
like being a lumber guy.
No,
And you didn't like, I don't know what else you didn't like,
No.
but did you belong to any of the clubs, Tony? Who was
No.
your best friend there?
okay. No, I never did belong to the club, but my best friend in high school was Jimmy Alanis. Jimmy and I,
Where did Jimmy live?
he lived on 4th Street.
Fourth and,
Fourth between K and L.
okay.
Yeah, and so,
La Reserva.
no, up here, yeah, no, up here on 4th.
Almost Beverly Hills.
Almost,
Oh,
almost Beverly Hills, almost
okay.
Beverly Hills, okay? And so I met Jimmy in junior high. Because that's when, as I said, I went to school in South Colton. I went to Garfield. I went kindergarten and first grade to Garfield. But because I lived on this side of the tracks.
On Fifth Street.
On Fifth, to go to Garfield, you had to cross the tracks.
I see.
So my mother didn't like that. At that time, San Salvador School, down at the end of Congress,
Uh-huh.
that opened up. So from second grade to sixth grade, I was over here at San Salvador.
So el consentido couldn't pass the railroad tracks.
No, I mean, there were some couple of people who got killed there. A couple
Yes,
of
I
kids.
remember, yeah.
But, yeah, so that's where I went to school. Boy, but then when I went to junior high, Colton